of you. Glad to have you back again this week. I can honestly tell you, I don't know where you're listening to me from, but here in Lewisville, Texas, I can honestly tell you that we finally, after months of hot weather, have started to have a little break in our weather. It's not fall yet. I mean, it was almost 90 degrees here today again, but it is starting to cool off a little bit. And I'm telling you, attitudes and smiles are improving, and it is really, we're starting to feel a little bit of hope here. And so anyway, you ought to come and visit sometime. It's a pretty amazing place. We're going to continue our deeper dive into one of the most well-known, but I think seldom fully understood passages in the Bible, and certainly one of my favorites to go back to again and again. And just to kind of bring you up to the moment, we're spending time looking at the individual words that make up the first two verses of chapter 12 in the book of Romans. And that may seem like kind of a crazy thing to do, but that's what we're doing. And I hope you hang with me through this. I think you'll maybe learn some new things and maybe hopefully be challenged in your faith and to be able to follow Jesus more fully and more completely. I think by the time we're finished, we will have looked at 9 different words and how they interact with each other and give meaning not just to those 2 verses, but to the whole message of Paul's letter to the Roman churches in the first century, and how those words really continue to teach us today in the modern church. So, let me read them again. You can follow along below. It says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, which is your true and proper worship." Our bodies offered as living sacrifices. A Jewish Christian living in the first century, I have no doubt, was well acquainted with the Jewish sacrificial system. It was a huge part of their history. I think through the years here at North Point, and even throughout my whole life, I've tried to do my best to understand what that sacrificial system was all about, and see how we extract meaning for those of us who are not Jewish, to be able to learn from that. And how to live our lives more fully surrendered to Christ. I have no doubt that those first century hearers of this letter could picture vivid details of placing the sacrificial lamb on the altar as an act of worship to God. It was part of their heritage. In the Old Testament, sacrifice, the whole sacrificial system, was, I think, a rather complex thing. In part, it was an offering to make things right with God after sin. Jewish people would also make sacrificial offerings to God as an expression of thanksgiving or gratitude for what he had done or what he had got them through. Sacrificial offering was a vital part of their heritage. And really, as we look in Romans, it was a vital part of their former way of life, as they had found their way to this incredible new meaning in Jesus Christ. I think as they came to understand that the sacrificial lamb was actually one picture of what Jesus would do for them as the last and final sacrifice, that would ever be needed for sins to be forgiven. These early Jewish disciples of Jesus, and I suspect even their non-Jewish Roman counterparts, I think they were people who really understood the idea of sacrifice. Certainly better than we do here 2,000 years later. So in this passage, when Paul called them to present themselves as living sacrifices, I can't help but think that those of Jewish heritage would have immediately been drawn back to the story of Abraham and Isaac, the great patriarch of Jewish heritage, and his young son. And they would have, I have no doubt at all that those early Jewish disciples would have eagerly told the story to their new Gentile brothers and sisters in the faith, much like they would have learned of those stories in their own homes as their forefathers had told them the stories throughout the ages. They would have remembered the story of how Abraham obeyed God and took his young son out to the mountains, built an altar, laid his son on that altar, lifted his knife to take his son's life, and then sacrifice him to God, just as the angel of the Lord had told him to do. I think until that same angel of the Lord stopped him, because God had witnessed the sincerity of Abraham's heart. You can go to Genesis chapter 22 and read that whole story again. I hope you do. As I reread the story, remembered the stories of my youth as this story was told to me, I wonder if that early Roman audience would have seen what I saw in my study this week, because honestly, it took me a little bit by surprise. Abraham is certainly the lead actor in this story. He is the grand hero of the faith, who is remembered for his willingness to obey God in the face of the most heinous command. But that's not what captured my attention this week, and actually captured my heart as I rethought this story. You see, Isaac was the living sacrifice in this historic narrative. Isaac, who was probably around 12 at that time, he was certainly old enough to be told by his father Abraham to help carry wood up the mountain. He was certainly old enough for that chore. Isaac, this young boy, willingly got on the altar. Think about it. I have no doubt that he had questions. His heart was no doubt in conflict over what he had to do. Think in his little mind, he was asking, should I trust my eyes and run for the bushes and get out of here? Or should I trust the words and the heart of my Father, who is standing right here next to me, getting ready to place me on the altar? Should I fight for my life, like everything in me says that I should do? Or should I stay on the altar? Should I stop looking for the way to get out of this and just surrender to it? I think those had to be questions that were going on in his little mind. You know, the altar of sacrifice paints a picture that cannot be misunderstood. The altar of sacrifice is the symbol of submission. It is the symbol of giving in, of dying to self, of offering up everything that my future holds for me. It's the ultimate white flag of surrender. That's what the altar of sacrifice is. Look again at this verse. Therefore, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice to God. You know, we climb up on sacrificial altars voluntarily. Nobody places us there. It's a decision of the will that we are all confronted with as we decide whether we are going to follow Jesus or not. Your family can drag you to church. Only you can get on the altar. To be a sacrificial offering means you release all claims or rights on your own life. You have got to be fully trusting in the one who leads you to the altar and then controls what happens next. That's what it means to be a living sacrifice to God. But here's the rub. Unlike dead animals, living sacrifices can crawl off the altar. They can. And we do. Regularly. To be a living sacrifice is a daily choice and an issue of the heart. Each and every day you get up and make the choice to live either for God or live for something else. It's that simple and that difficult. We speak often of giving our hearts to Jesus. Now, understood fully, that's a good thing. The heart is the center of our being. We studied this for weeks earlier this year. The heart is the center of choices, of values, of ethics, of the decisions that we make. But unfortunately for most people, when we speak of the heart, it never gets much past our emotions or our feelings. That's why a good song by the band in a worship service makes us feel like we are fully surrendered when we are hearing this beautiful melody and it touches us emotionally somehow. Here's a painful realization. There are a lot of people who want to give Jesus their emotions, but they don't much want to give Jesus anything else. We want to live our own way, act our own way, have our own priorities. And when that happens, there isn't much but leftovers to give to Jesus as the King. It's like we want to give Jesus our heart for 1 or 2 hours a week and then spend the rest of the week on ourselves, under our own rule. Hear me. That's living, but that's not a sacrifice. much less a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice means that every possession is Christ's and not yours. It means that every moment belongs to Christ and not to us. And every effort of our life is Christ's, not ours. It is an explosive thought to think about. I get it. But I think on a human level, you get it too. A bride and a groom commit themselves to each other once and for all on their wedding day. We get it. But the bride doesn't turn to the groom and say, on this day and in this moment, I am giving you my athletic ability. Nor does the groom say back to his wife, well, on this day in front of all of these witnesses, I will give you my handyman ability. Now, truth is, they may not have either one of those, but hypothetically, we look at that and we go, that's ridiculous. No. In a marriage ceremony, they vow, I give you and I take from you everything. I give you my all. And I guess I submit to you today that that's what it means to be a living sacrifice. At an early age, I was taught that baptism, the act of baptism, getting in the water and being immersed, was kind of like an altar of sacrifice. It was there that I visibly surrendered my life to the lordship of Jesus Christ. I was also taught in my church heritage, and the one that we participate in here at North Point, I was also taught that the act of communion, the taking of bread and juice, was a lot like a weekly reenactment of the holy moment when I got in the water, or as it were today, when I got on the altar of sacrifice. I hope that's true for you. Let's remember that in this holy moment with each other. Until next time, see ya.